I've had a lot of people ask about this Integra, which is one of my daily drivers that are in a lot of my videos. I'll start with like what it is now, and then I'll go through the story of how it became to be this. First off, yes, I did just wash the car, and that is because the clear coat is so bad that it looks much better when it's wet. The first thing that's really noticeable about this Integra is the JDM front 5-lug. A lot of people ask me about what wing this is because it looks so good on this Integra. And it's actually a Type X wing without the wing stands. Now for the engine, I have a B20Z. The car used to be auto, and obviously I manual swapped it and just upgraded eBay radiator. That has been doing great. It also has a JDM Integra Type R header. I also welded together a bunch of random exhaust pieces that I had to make the rest of the exhaust, and it's honestly so quiet. I love it. Oh yeah, at one point it did have a super cool roof wing, but that flew off somewhere. So a lot of people like doing exhaust clips to show how their car sounds, but personally I like doing engine clips. Let's go for a night drive. Alright, so here's the story. So at the time, I was living in Carbondale for school, and while I was there, I noticed a 4-door Integra that was in a parking lot. And later that day, a friend actually sent me a marketplace link to that same Integra. And so I messaged the guy and I was like, yo, I'm interested in the car. Like, when can I come check it out? He's like, oh, you can come check it out tomorrow. So he sends me an address, and it's an address to the parking lot that I found it at. So I thought that was a little weird, but whatever. I went with it and I went and checked it out. Upon inspecting the car, right off the bat, it didn't start. So that was a little alarming. And the front end had some core support damage, and the interior was tan, and it was disgusting. It looked horrible. And the whole rear end was smashed in. So then I take off the timing cover, and then I have him crank it, and the timing belt doesn't move. So I'm like, all right, this thing is blown. Because Integra motors are interference. Most likely the valves would have hit the pistons. So I'm like, look man, this thing is auto, has a blown engine, tan interior, the rear end is smashed, the front end has damage. Like, the best I can do is $50. Like, you know, ultimate lowball, but it's like, dude, I would not pay more than $100 for this thing. And he's like, yeah, no way, whatever. So we went our separate ways. And then 2 days later, he messages me, hey, do you think you could do $50 today? I just want to keep my wheels. And I was like, yeah, man, I'll be right there. So, I take off the GSR blades from my left-hand drive 2-door green Integra at the time, and I bring it on over. And then once I get to the car, I swap the wheels, and I give him the $50, and then he's just off on his way. So now I needed to try and find out how to get it to my house.
I don't know. He had that new Corolla.
No, he has this.
We know this was his.
He sold it.
So I had my friend drive my right-hand drive Integra, and then I rode in the Integra sedan, and we just pulled it all the way to the house. Once we got to the house, we were just messing around with it, and we're just yanking out as much damage as we could, and surprisingly got a lot out.
No way, I know that. Oh, water. Oh, that's disgusting. Oh, no. Stop.
Oh.
Back up. Oh, we still have slack. Keep going. Good.
Keep going?
Yeah.
Obviously it still needed a rear end, so I went and found all the rear end body pieces off of a part out. Also got some black interior trim while I was there. Oh no! But then, most importantly, I need to figure out the drivetrain situation. So I started with just putting a head gasket and a timing belt kit on the snap timing belt motor, and it still didn't hold compression, and there were indication marks that the valves had hit the piston heads, so that motor was no good. So during winter break, I took my green Integra up to visit my brother Nate at my parents' house. While I was there, we went to a junkyard and we found a CRV that had a B20 in it. The way that we picked out what CRV we were gonna pull the motor from was basing it off of body damage, because we'd rather it be a car that had body damage in the junkyard versus if it had no body damage, then maybe it was in the junkyard for a blown motor or something like that. Then I also cranked it by hand on the harmonic balancer just to make sure it had like 4 compression strokes. And then we put the B20 in the trunk of the Integra and drove it home. Then I went to another junkyard to find the manual transmission, and this Integra was on the ground, so that one was not fun. But it's really sad to see these cars trashed like that. Luckily the B20 was only $200, and also the transmission was only $200, so $400 for a drivetrain, I can't complain. On New Year's Eve, we pulled out the B18 and the manual transmission that was in the green Integra, and we put together the junkyard B20 and the junkyard manual transmission and put it back in the Integra. Now, why would we do this? Well, junkyard parts only have a 30-day warranty, so I'd rather test them out while I'm in the area versus while I'm 5 hours away in school. But luckily it worked, no problems, it started right up. So I put the B18 and the manual trans in the trunk of the Integra and drove back down to school. And then when I got down to school, I pulled out the blown B18 from the Integra sedan. Then I pulled the junkyard swap out of the green Integra and I put it into the Integra sedan. After I finished manual swapping the sedan chassis, I finished up putting the accessories on. Then I took it for its very first test drive. And the car drove great, although it did not have an exhaust on it, which was really annoying. So at this point, I needed to weld up an exhaust for it. And then I needed to start finding some interior parts, because I don't know about you guys, but I cannot stand tan interior. It's just like, it's so bad. It just does not look good. Thankfully, it's all black now, but how did we get that? Well, I went to St. Louis junkyard and I found an Integra sedan there. The car looked really decent. It was really sad to see it in there, and it was a really nice color. I still remember it. It was like a light purple color. It was so nice. Wish I could have saved that one. So I grabbed that interior, and then when I got back, I stripped out the tan interior from the sedan, and while it was all out, I scrubbed everything, the bare metal floor and all that kind of stuff, just to like get the cat smell out of it. I don't know, it smelled like animal. I think he had a pet or something, I don't know. But then I undercoated it and started putting some black interior in, and it was starting to come together. Then I went to another junkyard because I needed to get a dash, and also I needed to pick up a transmission for the 240 and a couple fenders and other stuff like that. Unfortunately, the interiors were just so nasty on the Integras because I guess they left the windows open or something. There were so many cool cars at that junkyard, it was really sad to see. Tell me what you think this car is. If you guessed MK4 Supra, you are correct. So then I loaded everything into the sedan and then drove it back home. Somehow I was able to fit all that stuff. At this point I was ready to get the rear end situated since it was driving right and the interior was starting to come together, but the body looked horrible. I didn't have a welder at the time. One of my teachers at school said I could use the welder there. So what I did was cut off the rear end of the car before going to school. That way it would be like ready to go with a new rear clip. When I was cutting off the rear end, I noticed that there had already been like a patch panel there, so it looks like it was already in an accident and someone already replaced it. So I had to cut further back because I wanted to replace everything else that was already replaced, just because I wanted it to be just one piece replaced in the back, not like sectioned. I took the car with no rear clip to a car meet like that just because I thought it'd be funny. And then I dropped it off at school to work on for the next morning. Then the next morning, I welded it up. It looked great. And then I closed the trunk and there was like an inch gap. And the trunk didn't have enough adjustment to like really make that look good. And it just bothered me so much. So that same day, I cut off the rear end again. So the next morning, I went to school and re-welded it. This time I measured twice instead of once. And it turned out much better, and the trunk lines are flush and it fits nice. So at this point the car was really starting to come together, but then my eBay shifter snapped. So I was in welding class at the time, so I took off the snap shifter and I welded up another shifter out of scrap metal. Honestly, it turned out pretty good. I like the way it looks. I didn't really like how low the other one was, so I made sure to make the new one a little longer. Oh yeah, and that is a chicken. I made it so that it can hold a flower pot. Then I gave that chicken to the teacher that allowed me to use the welder. Now that the rear end was on and it was straight, it was time to start doing some body work to fill in that gap. So I wire wheeled all the rust out of there and then filled it in with some body filler, sanded it smooth, and then I found the closest paint color at the store and just spray painted it to try and match the car. And honestly, it didn't look too bad for just a random can of spray paint. And while the bumper was off, I went ahead and filled in some of the letters for Integra. That way it just says tag on the bumper, because I think that's funny. One thing that always bothered me about Integras is the circle headlights. I wasn't really planning to put a JDM front just because this car is like the side project, but my brother was selling his JDM front end, so I bought it off of him. Then I sold my USDM front, and then we welded on this JDM front in one day. Not bad for a one-day turnaround. And then the very next morning I was heading to work, and then on the highway I would hit the gas and nothing would happen. It was just like the engine stopped putting out power basically, and I like coasted off to the side of the road and it would just crank, and that was it. I was thinking maybe the distributor went bad, or maybe the ECU or something, I don't know. Upon further inspection, I found out that the timing belt was not moving while cranking.
The 5Gs, I think 526 terabytes.
So I had the car towed home and I took the 240 to work that day. When I got back home from work, I inspected the car, took it all apart, and where the timing belt is like connected on the crankshaft pulley, all of the teeth were sheared off. Oh, there they are. The crank pulley was moving just fine, but the belt wasn't spinning. So I was like, oh man, it probably, bent all the valves or something. But I was like, you know what, let's just slap a timing belt on there and see what happens, because you just gotta know. So I slapped the timing belt on there and it started right up, no problems. And I was like, what? I mean, it's still driving fine to this day. So then the next day I was leaving for work and then someone sideswiped the car. And I was like, come on, man, like one thing after the other. So then I had to sit there with a hammer and a pry bar and try and hammer out my wheel well so it wasn't grinding on my tire. And that was just more body work to fix later on. And at first I wasn't planning on Five-lug swapping this car, just, you know, because it was a side project. I've always been curious to make a Five-lug conversion kit that doesn't involve like the whole, oh, $1,200 swap kit, JDM type bar. Like, I wanted to figure out a way to use all 90s Honda parts and like match each random car together to make it work. So I did, and it works. I'll have to make another video on that. That'd be a pretty helpful one. So then I just slapped on some 300ZX wheels for the time being, and then I was able to pick up one of my favorite 90s wheels, which are these Enki RS 2-piece wheels. 2 are high disc and 2 are low disc. I kind of like the offset of it. It looks pretty cool. Like one has dish and one is just like all face of the wheel. I also picked up a JDM Integra Type R lip. It makes the car look so much better with the lip on it. I also painted the hood blue because the white was just overkill. At this point, I've had the car for a whole year, and it's crazy to see how far it's come. Not only was I a full-time college student, but I was also working. I was also building the 240 and was also repairing the right-hand drive Integra. That car is gonna need its whole background story too, man. So at this point in the build, I definitely needed to update the suspension. Suspension is one thing I feel like no one should really ever cheap out on. I've seen how the cheap stuff lasts. I've been there. I didn't know any better. And some of the threads on those control arms will just shear right off. And some of the lower control arm bushings will literally just fall out. And I've seen people that have their control arms snap in half. And that's just from daily driving. That's one thing that I really think should be taken seriously when building a car is quality suspension. So I bought a set of stance coils and Voodoo lower control arms, Function 7 subframe brace, 1320 sway bar links, and 32mm Integra Type R sway bar. While I was under the car, I cleaned up some of the surface rust and sprayed some undercoating on it. And it turned out pretty nice. I love the look of the chrome silver control arms, especially from the back. I don't know, it just looks so clean. Now I got the car handling and driving good, so it was time to do some body work. And both rear quarter panels were in pretty rough shape. Luckily not from rust, but it was like random dents and dings on it, plus like that side swipe that happened. I ended up like welding all the low spots and some of the seams, grinding that smooth, and then filling it in with body filler and then sanding that smooth. At this point, I really needed to get the car just to one color so it wasn't looking like such a hoopty. So my girlfriend and I spray painted it blue just for now. Hopefully, you know, someday in the future I'll be able to give it a nice paint job, especially considering how far this car has come. I think it turned out pretty good, especially for a car that I've just been, you know, building on the side. It's not really like the priority build or anything like that. This car is like a perfect example of just use what you got. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to work. Not bad for a $50 car, huh? This thing is super slow, but that's okay, because it's the daily. And honestly, I've been loving this 33 miles to the gallon on a $200 junkyard motor. Like, can't beat it. But yeah, I think it turned out all right for a 1.5-year side project. But what do you think? Did it turn out okay? What should I do next?